And a very good evening to you and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines and it's a new day, new week, and of course, politics and politically related issues are always here to be discussed. Um, Today, of course, we take you behind the news. The last week, the International Republican Institute released a poll, and we are going to be discussing that poll today. I noticed that the mainstream media did not pay very much attention to it, and that may tell us something about priorities and so forth. We are going to pay attention to it. We're going to be talking about what it tells us about our society at this particular juncture. We're going to be talking about what it confirms and what possibly new things it tells us about the issues in our society and how people feel about them. So welcome to Politics 101. I want to welcome everybody, whether you are joining us from Guyana or in the diaspora, in the wider Caribbean, North America, Europe, South America. Welcome to Politics 101. Of course, here on this program, we try to bring you one angle of what we feel that our society should be engaged in. And we hold the view that our society needs informed discussion, informed analysis, and we try to provide that. We are not saying that that's the only thing that the society needs, but we are saying that that's an important ingredient of any functioning society, any functioning democracy you must have an informed populace. And when we talk about information, we are talking about something that goes beyond propaganda. We're talking about analysis, critical analysis. And we're talking about the discourses. And we feel that is an important ingredient in this program has evolved over time. I'm not saying that's necessarily how we began, but we've evolved over time to become the program on this platform that deals with informed and critical analysis and try to engage policy in a critical way. Of course, you know, we do have our biases, and I don't shy away from our biases. As the host of the show, I do have my own political bias, but we try not to begin from that standpoint. We try not to begin from our bias in our quest for information, but we want to make very clear that we are not into this foolish business of objectivity, you know, whatever that means. We do have our biases, but we are not going to be imprisoned by our biases. And so that's where we stand on Politics 101. And we employ the format of bringing into the program people with different views, different perspectives. And when we put it all together, we hope we're able to leave you much more informed. And so, as I said, the IRI, this International Republican Institute, it had a few months ago announced itself and that it was going to be helping with electoral reform, and that was announced by the government of Guyana. And as you remember, several organizations and political parties of the opposition came out and made it very clear that they were not amused by the fact that a Republican institute would be spearheading electoral reform and the constitutional reform in Guyana. Later on, I think the IRI would have clarified its position to say that it did not intend to spearhead constitutional reform in Guyana. It was here in Guyana to help in whatever ways it could help. And apparently the first thing it did was to commission this poll to try to get a sense of Guyanese view or views on various economic, social, and political issues. I have long argued that Guyana has suffered tremendously because we are not a country of polls. Not that polls tell you everything you want to know about a society, but it's a good measurement of where a society is in terms of its collective political view at given moments. Because, as you know, a poll is a snapshot. Of where people are at a particular moment. That could change as circumstances change, the time change, and so forth. So we are not saying that a poll is the most reliable medium, of where people are on the issues, but it is very useful. It's very useful. You're able to look at how people's attitudes change over time and so on. And we in Guyana have not really, we don't have comprehensive polls. Years ago, it must have been almost 2 decades ago, Clive Thomas, I think there were 3 citizens. I remember Thomas, I remember Grantley Walron, and somebody else, I'm forgetting the third person. They had commissioned a comprehensive poll that I still use today. I mean, it's really 2 decades old, but I still use it in my own work because I've not seen any comprehensive poll since then. I know political parties sometimes commission their own polls, but as you would imagine, those polls would be geared to telling the stories that the political party would want to have a sense of. Political parties, as you know, are organizations that are concerned with electing people to office and running government. So those private polls would be quite narrow in terms of their scope. But we don't find our newspapers, for example, commissioning regular polls and so forth. And I really think it's really an issue in our society, so that we have to depend more on anecdotes rather than hard data. Somebody asks you, you talk about ethnic discrimination, it's there because people experience it every day and they tell you. But the fact of the matter is that you don't have polls that question people on those issues. And so I am quite glad for this poll. One may have a problem with the messenger, the people who commission the poll, and they may have their biases too. All right, and we'll talk about that as we go through some of the questions here tonight. So Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to the place on social media where you get to engage, as I said, in informed discussion and analysis, and to bring to bear that aspect of our political culture, that aspect of our culture in general, which is where we think through issues. We know frustrations, and people say, you all talk too much and don't engage in action. And that could push us to not engage in discussion of issues. But we have to. It's an important aspect of our culture. It's an important aspect of all cultures. Many of us, my generation, generations before, and even generations after my generation, our parents who could barely read and write, who could didn't went very far in school. They wanted us to go to school. Education was this pathway to social mobility and to success and so forth. And so they understood the importance of engaging in informed discussion and so forth. And it's not something we should give away. It's not something that we should give up. So we are going to insist that we engage in that exercise here. Welcome, everybody. My guests tonight are, as usual, people who are on the ball. Some of them do it for a living. Some of them do it as conscientious Guyanese who are concerned with where we are. They think about the issues. Before I bring in my guests, we have a couple of slides that we want to show you on the IRI poll. So if my operator is ready, it's all yours. I know you can't read as fast, but we thought that we would put that up there. The poll was conducted in January of this year, so it's kind of fresh information. All right, our guests tonight are our regulars. We have Dr. Henry Jeffrey, no introduction to Politics 101. Mr. Adam Harris, no introduction to Politics 101. And we have a new addition to the team, or the squad, if you will. And it's a name that I'm sure that most of you have become familiar with because it's kind of a household name. But a lot of people have said, well, who is this person behind the name? G.H.K. Lal. I don't think a day passes that you don't see a letter in the newspapers over the signature G.H.K. Lal, all the newspapers. I don't know about Guyana Times and the Chronicle. I don't get around to reading them as often, but certainly Kaieteur News, certainly the Stabroek News, certainly the Guyana Times. In fact, he's a columnist for the Kaieteur News. G.H.K. Lal, G is for Gabriel, and Lal, welcome to Politics 101. And I hope when you finish here tonight, you come back. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Hines, Dr. Jeffrey, Mr. Adams, who I am familiar with, and I am appreciative of the opportunity to share a thought or two with our brothers and sisters in Guyana. I hope that whatever I bring to the table will be well received and will contribute to the discourse, the discussion that you spoke at length about, that we so desperately need in this country. Open, frank, balanced discussion. So back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And since you have the microphone, let me just start with this question. I did say in my introduction that every pollster, every organization has its bias as it goes into the poll. There are things that they would want to emphasize. There are things they would not want to emphasize. Do you think that the emphasis in this poll as you went through it? Do you think the emphasis was a balanced emphasis, or did you see some bias in terms of the areas that were emphasized?
Well, there are only so much, Dr. Hines. There are only so many areas you can touch within the scope of a poll, of any particular poll. And I think the IRI, despite my prejudice against them, they put out a pretty good product here. The outcome of the polls reflects some some highly held beliefs of mine, and they had some things that were remarkable in that they were so surprising, especially as it related to our electoral process and our recent elections results. I think they ought to be commended for what was put out there.
And Dr. Jeffrey, same question to you. Did you feel it was the emphasis was bias or balance? And your initial thoughts your initial general thoughts?
Thank you very much, David, and good to see you, Mr. Lal, Adam. My, let me start from what I would like to think of as the beginning. I have always said, and I think everybody in Guyana should be made to understand that anything that has to do with elections should be by consensus. It should be by consensus. Elections are about changing governments, and governments can't be in charge of the process that deals with the very matters that will either change them or keep them in office. Now, so when I did not have a chance to, I didn't have a copy of the poll to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but I started also with a bias against the IRI. And since I did not read the poll, I cannot say that from the poll I have lost any, I am not still biased. What I would say is that what this poll suggests, and well, what I have is some paper, some articles coming from the Demerara Wave. And in that article, they are quoted, the report is quoted as saying that the IRI has been in contact with all the stakeholders about this matter. Well, the major stakeholder for me in this must be the government itself, the people in the opposition, and the civil society groups. Unfortunately, when I spoke to the people in the opposition, or important people in the opposition, they said they had nothing to do with this thing. Now, they were not informed about it. They might be wrong, I don't know. But I'm saying that immediately sends a message to me. It says that the questions that are being asked here, indeed, you can ask yourself, if you're going to talk about elections, what you say about election must have something to do with what you believe the major problem in Guyana is. If you believe that the major problem in Guyana has to do with the nature of the political system, the winner-take-all system that makes elections and winning almost a life and death struggle, you might pay less attention to this thing about the electoral process. But if you feel that what occurred in 2020 is essentially an issue about how the election was organized and all of that, you may have a different kind of outlook. Now, you would have had to speak to the stakeholders to come up with some kind of understanding on what the stakeholders feel. What we have here, if what I am told is true, that the major stakeholder had no part of this, was not spoken to about the kinds of questions that are being asked, well, that for me becomes a big problem. It's never a problem in terms of when I speak to things about myself. I am talking about the entire process. That becomes a major problem for me. When I looked at the bit I got from Demerara Waves, the 3 bits I got from Demerara Waves, because I wasn't able to get the document. Yes, I'll say that much of what they said, of course, we kind of have an idea of and more or less knew. And but as Mr. Lal also said, when around the election issue and the entire thing about credibility of the elections, you have a bit of a shock there. You have situations where you are saying something like 56% question the outcome of the election, 56% of people. 48% of Africans, for instance, assuming Demerara will have these numbers correct, 48% of Africans says definitely no, that the election did not reflect the will of the people. And where the surprise might be that 28% of Indians also said definitely no, that it did not represent what the people feel and what the interest of the people. So I am saying that yes, they did do some things that brought throw some light upon some fuzzy areas that we might not have thought the way that the research actually turned out. But as I said before, for me, central for this is not these sort of things. It's whether or not we will get consensus on a documentation when you go through. And that is my major concern here. Because without consensus, you should not be moving with any kind of electoral or constitutional reform that has to do with electoral businesses.
Yeah. Thanks to that, Henry. Before I bring in Adam, a quick note. I got the sense that all the stakeholders, including the political parties, were invited to be part of the process. I know the party that I belong to, the Working People's Alliance, was invited, and we participated in the consultations. Now, I don't know that the political parties and the stakeholders had any input on the questions for the poll, but the consultations before the poll, they were consultations. Whether the opposition parties opted not to take part in the consultations, I don't know. But our party, the WPA, did take part in the consultations. So I just wanted to put that on the poll. Consultations on the poll, yes.
Yeah, good. All right. Yes. Well, right. My information suggests that because if you were invited to consultation and you went, you could have raised all the issues you have to raise about polls.
Right.
You know, what kind of questions you're asking, let's hear about it. But maybe the person who informed
maybe the person was not informed. But like I said, I was not our party's representative. So I didn't know, I don't know whether the other parties were there. But like I said, I know our party was invited and we participated. The second thing is that the Demerara Waves article gave the impression that the responses were to the 2020 elections. But when you go through the poll, the responses are to elections in general, not the 2020 election. But your point is well taken. If the IRI felt that the 2020 election was a flashpoint. And so we needed to know more about it. It might have included that. That's why I use the term emphasis. If the emphasis may have suggested that the IRI didn't want to go to that controversy, and my sense is that they didn't want to. So they kept it general and says, what do people feel about elect? But it is instructive, the responses we got from the country in general, but particularly from Indian Guyanese. And we'll come back to that later. Adam, your general thoughts?
No, I have a problem with polls. The big problem is who is conducting it? All right. What is your sample? Now I'm hearing 58%, 28%. Was the poll conducted in Georgetown? Was it widespread? Did we talk to people on the West Demerara, Berbice, Essequibo Coast? I don't know. And the pollsters didn't say. So you take a sample. I don't know where the sample is unless the big document has all the details about the sample. So I am tempted to take some of the findings with a pinch of salt. We could all come up with the idea, if you talk about the 2020 elections, they are relatively fresh in our minds. We know that a lot went wrong. We know that GCOM made some promises that it didn't fulfill. It told the people to document the whatever it was, and we will discuss it. That discussion never took place. So yes, if the poll was looking at 2020 elections, good. If you're looking at elections in general, what was your sample? Was it a Georgetown-based poll or was it a countrywide poll? So I'm not going to read too much into it, nor am I going to say too much about the findings.
Let me read for you here, Adam. The survey was conducted on behalf of the IRI by CID Gallup. Data was collected between January 4th and January 24, 2022. The sample consisted of 1,500 Guyanese adults aged 18 and older. A multi-stage probability sampling method was used to design a nationally representative sample based on the 2012 national census. The sample was stratified by region and by settlements, followed by random selection of primary sampling units within each stratum. The achieved sample was weighted for ethnicity, gender, age, and region, according to figures from the 2012 census. The response rate was 20%. The margin of error for the mid-range full sample does not exceed positive 2.5 points.
Positive or minus?
Positive or minus. So I think your question is answered there. It was done by a reputed polling agency, that is Gallup, and its representative was based on the 2012 census, and it was weighted for ethnicity, for gender, for age, and for region. So I think that answers your fears here.
All right.
I'm sorry, I should have gotten the full document to you guys, but I just assumed that you all had gotten the document and had gone through it. Nevertheless, the first finding of the poll was 48% of those who polled felt that economic issues were the most important issues. Economic issues were the most important issues. And that included the economy, cost of living, and high prices, 26%. The economy / unemployment, 17%. Other general economic issues, 4%. Small business opportunities, access to loans, 1%, which brings us to 48% of the people felt that the economy was the most important problem facing the country today, as opposed to Corona, which got 11%, internal conflicts such as ethnic and religious conflict, 7%, economy, 48%. GHK Lal. Surprising, not so surprising. What's your take?
It's not surprising at all because you listen to the people, minimum wage people, above minimum wage people, the the people in this country are hurting. So therefore, the 48% finding of this poll, accounting for that 2 minus 2.5 plus 2.5 possible deviation, it reflects the pain of our people who cannot make ends meet. I'm not talking about people with cars. I'm talking about people who have to catch the minibuses, people who have to go to the markets, who cannot buy at Massey, who have to send their children to school, two children, and are working for $44,000 or $60,000, which should be off the table, or $80,000, and they just can't make ends meet. So it's a function of cost of living. We hear this fancy phrase, quite rightly, of global supply chain crisis and the flooding, which is now faded. But when you put this combination of things, the fallout from the coronavirus, definitely I can understand and appreciate that economic issues, 48% of Guyanese are concerned. They are concerned and make it the most important issue because they are hurting. Let me say something to you on a personal note. As a remigrant, as a retiree, as a pensioner, foreign and local, I have an understanding of what the cost of living and the economic situation are about. But I never used to, how should I say, feel it. Now I recognize some more that is there. So if this is happening to me, what is happening to the run of the mill, working class, ordinary Guyanese man and woman out there with families to feed? Definitely this rises to the surface as a showstopper in this country, which I hope that our politicians are hearing as they emphasize so much, so many billions on so many big ticket projects that we keep hearing about, editorialized about, written about in letters, appearing in the news, and they're asking themselves, what is in it for us? We have a budget that is doubled. What is there for us? Sure, there's some pension increases. Sure, there's some relief here and there. But the gasoline prices have wiped that out. The cost of living increases, rising prices have wiped those out, made those nullified those. So the pain keeps increasing. And we hear of promises being made, and we hear of the 1% people who are flourishing. We see them in the news every day. We read about them. And where are the rest of Guyanese? Where public servants? How can public servants exist with what is going on? How can domestics? How can our security guards? How can our teachers, regardless of your political bias, how can they get by from day to day if they have a family of two children and two adults inside? So therefore, it does not surprise. The short answer to the question, Dr. Hines, is that it does not surprise me in the least that economic issues rises to the level of this urgency.
Dr. Jeffrey, the economic issues, even as we face all other problems, the economic issue stands out at this particular junction. Comment.
Of course. I mean, it is true. You can't walk away from that. Public servants were mentioned. They got 7% increase or something like that. Inflation is 12%. So it goes without saying that economic issues will be at the forefront of people's minds. You only got to go in the market. I go in the market and I see the increases in the prices. So it will be important. You see, David, but this wouldn't change people from voting for the PP or PNC.
But we'll come to that.
No, 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 no. You
Yeah,
must,
yeah,
you
yeah.
see, because you're going to want to give priority. You got to then look at the level of priority you are giving to this, because this is not the central issue that we are faced with. This don't change anything, like corruption and these things are changing nothing. More people might vote for you if you're corrupt. The truth is that this is an important issue for people. All people can come and tell you that this is the situation. There should be a universal basic income, in my view, because when you start talking about new investments and local content and so, those monies, the most of it goes to the people that got capital already. Ordinary people should be getting a universal basic income, given the situation that we are in. But even without the situation we are in, this is the way that perhaps you will deal with some of their hardships that we know that they're facing. So when I see these, I say yes. I mean, it must come to the fore. That's what hurting people more than anything. COVID will, in its own time, disappear, but this would not necessarily disappear, so to speak. This will be an issue with you forever.
Let me ask you a follow-up question, and I'll ask Adam to take a bite of it on it when it comes his turn and GHK. I agree with you that this is not going to change political minds. But what does it tell the political parties? I don't think it tells the PPP the same story that it tells.
Of course not.
But,
of course not.
So I want you to elaborate on that.
Of course not, because the PPP might have different motivation. The PPP would go out and say, oh, we are giving subsidies to this and subsidies to that and subsidizing this. But when they're subsidizing, for the most part, they're in that kind of universal way, they're subsidizing everybody. So you might already be giving to people that already have. You're not tackling the people that really need. And therefore, you know, the PPP might have different motivations. If the politicians are anything to go by, they will say, I've seen it in social media, PPP want to keep black people poor, so they're going to go away. Imagine that's how far you gone. And this was never around this place until around recently.
Is the burden more on the PNC and the opposition to pay attention to these numbers?
Of course, they have to make it quite clear that you have to have something like a universal basic income that's going to help people immediately. And you have to go out there with a program that says, look, don't worry about all this local content and all this. You have to go out there with a program that said that there must be a distribution of wealth on an equitable basis, both generational and current wealth. Not overnight, not at the same time they did it in Malaysia, now overnight, not at the same time, but you have to have a program. This is not just talking the same old talk. You have to have those kind of things in play. So yes, I know this must hurt people. I mean, this must be everyday talk with everybody you meet, you know. It is hurting. But
Adam Harris?
Maybe read it quite differently.
Adam Harris, 48% of the people feel that the economy and issues of the economy are most important. And how does that translate politically?
Well, 48% of those polled. Now, a year or two back, statistics showed that 36% of Guyanese live below the poverty line.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We take that. 26% live in abject poverty. They're more poor than the church mouse. Now, those people, I'm going at the bottom, who live in abject poverty, some would be public servants working at the bottom of the scale. You give them 7%, you can't even bring them up to the poverty level. So that 48% looks small. Those who live below the poverty level, you give them some handouts and what have you, but you still don't bring them up to the poverty level. Dr. Jeffrey talked about a basic scale. I don't remember the exact term he used.
Universal
But
basic
we
income.
need to bring up those people.
Right.
I can tell, thank you. And I can tell you, I'm not a rich man. I don't have children to support and all of that. I got one grandson who I'm living with. And the amount of money that I would have to give to people, I am sure I give away more than $25,000 a month. People come, Adam, I ain't got nothing to cook. You get them at 2,000. Adam, this happened. It's like that every month, every month. So I perhaps deal with the 28% who live in abject poverty. Now, those just above the poverty line, as GHK said, and Henry, you got to go in the market. I know that because I go in the market. 3 days ago, a cost, because when I went to buy a cylinder cooking gas, it was $4,800, $300 more. Now, I got an increase in old age pension. The cooking gas just eat up that. When you go in the market, cassava that I used to buy at $80 a pound, I'm paying $300 a pound for. I mean, all of these things. And my old age pension and move no way. My NIS pension and move no way. And the little hustler got and compensate for those increases. So in effect, I am starting to live on my savings. If I live long enough, I could very well end up at the level of those in abject poverty, unless my children decide to bail me out, and my sisters and all of them. So when the poll said 48%, I don't know who they talked to. I thought 80% would have said the economy was the biggest thing. I mean, we used to talk about a living wage, and we calculated light bill, transportation. Transportation costs gone up. Who was it? I think it was GHK who talked about a family of 4. That is a joke. Most poor people got at least 5 children. They got to go to school. For about the last 3 years or so, we were talking about seeing what some children carry to school in their lunch kit. When the prices were lower than now, what are they carrying, or are they no longer going to school? So 48% said the economy. I'm sorry, 48% of who they talk to.
Well, 48% says the number one issue. But the 52% that name other issues, if you were to ask them what are your 2 most important issues, they may name the economy as the second most important after their first choice.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So it's as I say, I normally take polls with a pinch of salt. I always remember a poll in the US. It was Hubert Humphrey. The poll declared him president. And that newspaper actually printed him as president the same night when the final count was coming in the last elections.
1960.
So I look at polls.
Yeah.
I take a little.
Sorry. I thought you were
Yeah,
finished, Adam.
I take a little bit from them, but I don't set much store by them.
Mhm. JHK, Henry Jeffrey raised the point that there may be no political penalty for the political parties. Where do you stand on that?
Political penalties in terms of what?
In terms of what the poll tells us, that
Well, of,
48% of the people feel that the economic problems are the big issue.
well, I think he's on the money because I am hearing about. Let's look at the last elections, if that is a barometer for or an indicator of where things stand. We had about 9, 10, 11 new groups that came out, time for change, and they're not going to do this and they're going to do all these positive things. And at the end of the day, they couldn't even get a seat between, they barely were able to gather a seat. What's that, about 6,000 votes? Help me out here. But the fact of the matter is that
Mm,
of the people who voted, it went straight down the line in terms of PPP, PNC, and which even more highlights that 28% of Indians who said, well, something wrong with this thing. Something
yeah,
wrong with how you're accounting or with this whole system and this process that Dr. Jeffrey spoke about. Now, penalty specifically, briefly, nothing happening.
and
Nothing happening to either one.
that's the contradictory of where we are. Two numbers jumped out at me. 64% of those polls felt that their elected representatives do not represent them adequately in the councils of government. And 54% of young people feel they have no future in Guyana. Since I'm with you, GHK, take a bite of what that tells us.
All right. So two issues there. Political representation. I have heard the lament, repeated laments from coalition supporters following the 2015 elections. It is something that came back to haunt them. I spoke to a few people, never been in the party, never been in any party, but the people that had a relationship with, I said, you are going about this thing wrong. The people said, the people in the grassroots who supported the coalition government said, before the elections of May 2015, they were all over the place. They were talking to us. They were reaching out to us. They were engaging us all the time. Come the elections results of 2015, we couldn't see them. We couldn't see them at all. So how, if you can't see them, if you can't connect to them, how can you table your issues of major importance to them? And they have paid a price for that in some respects almost 2 years ago. So I agree with that. The PPP has, I think, been sensible enough to learn from that, so it's spreading the wealth around, and it's spreading the health around to selected people. Let's get that straight.
Yeah,
Instead of spreading the rectors, so its own people. Look at what happened with flood relief money. Look at what happened with what we heard about, which were quickly brushed under the carpet, is that we didn't get what due to we. We didn't get what we were expecting to come to we. Now, whether rightly or wrongly, that's the first issue. The second issue the question that you raised was about young people. Let me say this to you. Let's face this in the starkest terms. Daily, you go to Duke Street, go to the American Embassy. This ain't got nothing to do, this got everything to do with when the 23 years the PPP were in power, the 5 years when the coalition was in power, 4 or 5 years, and the almost 2 years, but today, the majority of people who are lining up, going for visas, temporary or permanent, are Indians. This has not changed. And in the past, I think the US Embassy, the State Department, had put out something that said 50,000 Guyanese left in a short number of years. I think it was about a decade. Please don't hold me to that. But what this is saying, and that's spread across the age ranges, is that people in Guyana in general, despite oil, despite this bonanza and all this wealth, they're saying, you know what? I can take me chance in the white man country. I can go somewhere else. Now, young people specifically are looking around, the constructive ones, the ones that want to be progressive, and they're saying, well, ain't got nothing here for me. And especially if I'm of a particular political strain, if I'm and I have to bring this in, if I'm of a racial strain, ethnic strain, as you guys would call it. And so they do what I did, which is what I wrote in the piece, the little piece I wrote for Demerara Waves, based on those 3 news items from Demerara. I said, in the 70s, I said, where do I stand? What can I look forward to? What can I hope for? And I said, you know what? I got to go and take my bearings and my temperature in Uncle Sam country. 31 years, the prime years of my life were given there. I'm back here. I don't think the American embassy is too pleased with some of the things I put out but be that as it may, I can understand and I will even encourage. I'm a patriot. I consider myself a super patriot, but I will still encourage young people to do one of 2 things. If you're going to stay here, be prepared to go to the mat. But if you really want to address your economic issues, your future prospects, then you got to do like me and go elsewhere. And when you equip yourself financially, educationally, and philosophically, intellectually, then you come back here and you could do what you want to do. But right now, in terms of what you can give to this country, what you can expect from this country, shades of John Kennedy, Guyana expects a lot of you. It's not there for you because you are unable to give as much as you think you can give because you're not given, the opportunities are not there. They feel that there's no room for them, no place for them, despite all this talk about 50,000 jobs in this sector and this place opening and all these subcontractors. People just are disillusioned about what Guyana holds for them, the young people especially.
Some frank talk there from our new guest tonight, Mr. G.H.K. Lal, as frank as they come. Henry Jeffrey, numbers there, 64% of the people say they don't think they're adequately represented. 54% of young people say they don't have any future. Before I bring you in, let me just say, let me just comment on something Mr. Lal said just now. Prior to 2020 elections, I went around the country to 22 communities from Anscombe the east right up to Stroudville on the west. We went to 22 communities and we held some community meetings. And people were frankly saying that we do not believe that the coalition government that we voted for represented our interests in government. We were getting 75 people, 50 people at these community meetings. We figure if 50 and 75 were brave enough to come out, there are 4 times those who are not brave enough to come to WPA meeting. We reported to partners. We said there are about 20 to 25% of your support base who feel you did not represent and they're prepared not to vote for you. They're not prepared to vote for the other side. They were clear about that. In the end, the numbers that were declared showed about 25%, 75% turnout for the coalition, which proved that we were within the ballpark of what we projected without a poll. Without a poll. We were just based on community meeting and what people were coming us, telling us to our faces. Henry Jeffrey.
Well, yes, I saw those numbers, and it is quite clear that both young people and their parents believe they have no future. So there's going to be a lot of encouragement for them not to stay here to look at any future whatsoever. Again, I am going to but let me just back up a little bit. You see, it's a lot of more people than you think. I'm seeing about 67% of people saying that it's how they ask the question. When you ask a person, they were very satisfied very poorly satisfied
Yes,
is one of the questions. Somewhat well satisfied.
right.
And when you ask questions like this, by the time you are finished, if you really, nobody really satisfied whatsoever. And these numbers are much more than they seem to be when you go and you're concluding that it's only 40 or 50%. But as I said, yes, I mean the system. The problem with the system is, guess why they don't go. PPP does a better ground job than the PNC anywhere. But guess why they don't care? They don't care because uh, Mr. Lal gave the numbers at the end of the last election. Look what happened. For all they weren't coming out, I know you made your volunteer effort. They're all over the place saying, forgive them, forgive them, forgive them. Okay. But at the end of the day, these people are turning out in those numbers. That is why we have, I said, there is no accountability for these parties. When they are finished, they can almost do anything. Look, if the PVP, if there was an accountable party, Orphan might never been president because people were so much against him in the party. But you can hold on, do what you gotta do your match, and win. So the question here is, it always boils down to the fact that the political parties are not accountable to you. People come out and vote for them for largely ethnic reasons. And the result is that they don't pay you mind. They don't have to pay you mind. You said, why they're not coming? They're not coming because they don't have to. That is the issue in Guyana. You got to have a system that makes them accountable to you. So I don't spend too much time notice. I notice it. I say, well,
Right.
this will not change until you
And
change
to
the
support
system.
what you say, Henry, only 7% of the people feel that the political parties represent their
Yes,
interests very well.
yes,
21% says somewhat well. So if you take away that 21%, really only 7% of people is 93% who either feel they don't represent or are ambivalent. So
exactly.
you're quite right. I'm being charitable in how I'm calculating the numbers. Mr. Harris, your view on these two pieces: 64% or 93% of the people feel that they're not properly represented by their political parties, and 54% of young people feel that they have no future in this country.
That is so accurate. And GHK said exactly what I would have said. You have young people who, one, wanted a job. So some of them thought, well, okay, the party gonna give me a job in some one of the ministries. And the party could have done, the PPP is doing that, but it didn't. One man was accused of telling somebody, we are not an employment agency. You go to the various councils, even the Georgetown, go to the city council in Georgetown. Let the people tell you, yes, they can see the mayor. Ask them who is their representative in the area. Where I live, I got a fellow who came around once to say, I'm your representative. Great, I admire that. I see him again. The young people also have this nice little problem, a problem of being able to access relatively grown people who can talk to them. You said you went to community meetings and you can talk to people in their 30s, perhaps 40s, 50s. How many, if any of us, try to engage people in their teens and 20s? We talk about career guidance. Apart from a few private organizations, how many of us did that? None. We don't look at our young people. We don't. We catch them and we lock them up if they get a little ganja. If they don't dress too nice, we tell them they're ragamuffins and no good, and we don't want to talk to them. If they come and they try to ask us for some help or something, at the back of our head, they're planning to rob me. We don't relate to our young people. We don't have an organization to relate to them. At one time, political parties had a youth arm where people used to talk with them. That's non-existent now. The 64% that talk about the government representing them, I did a piece and I said, once you're sharing money, you're big. But once you start, you got to continue. And when you don't continue, you're in trouble. You are in serious trouble. And the day of reckoning is going to come for the PPP. It talks about employing every single sugar worker who was dismissed. What are you going to have them doing? You're giving them a handout. And the nation sits back to see one set of people getting a handout that is bigger than my old age pension. What do you think those other people are going to say? It's a worrying situation. We've already lost a lot of people. I think it was GHK2 who talked about advising people, if you got to go outside, hustle, and come back. I'm not proud to say it. My daughter was here and she didn't want to leave because she thought she could stay. What happened to me? She had a son. And 12 years ago, I said, girl, look, I'm all right. I can handle myself. You go along. She went. She was a nurse here. My daughter got more money and more assets than I could have dreamed of having. She just come back. After 12 years, she built a big house in Sophia there. Nobody living in it. She buy a house down in Florida to paying for itself. She live in the house in Jersey that me and she mother to set up. She is so much better off. She paying for her son to go to college. All of that out there. Had she been in Guyana, what? So GHK is right. Advise them to go. I have a nephew who graduated from med school. I ain't know if they know he's my nephew. He ain't got a job yet. And that's a trained doctor. He ain't no big doctor because he ain't doing the business long. But he ain't working. Now, what do you think he's going to do? He's scrambling to get a scholarship to go overseas. So we're going to lose another skilled person. That's the reality.
And that's the reality. Mr. Adam Harris there, our panel tonight is Adam, Henry Jeffrey, and GHK Lal is our new guest on tonight's program. We are discussing a recent poll that was released by the IRI, the International Republican Institute, and we are dissecting the poll to see what's new, what's not new, what's surprising, what's not surprising. Something jumped out at me, gentlemen. It says here, what is the primary reason? The question, what is the primary reason you did not vote in the 2020 elections? 29% said not eligible to vote. So I am assuming these are people who weren't registered. Then it said not registered to vote, 14%. Lack of interest, 11%. Lack of confidence in the electoral process, 6%. When you add that up, 60% of the people, that's 43, 54, 60% of the people who did not vote really had no interest in the elections. What is that telling us? Alienation from government? Giving up on Guyana? GHK?
Well, I think it goes back. It goes back to what Dr. Jeffrey said at the beginning of this program, that there is disgust. There is disgust, utter disgust with the process, the entire electoral process as we know it and as we have lived with it over the years and decades. And so I have some difficulty with the part about not eligible. That could mean they were below age, but then they were 18 years and over. So
And over.
that
Right,
doesn't
right.
add up. That doesn't
It
add up.
doesn't
So
add up.
good.
It
So
doesn't add up.
your stats really do add up, and I thank you for that. But so let's refocus here. There is a frustration and an alienation and a separation from our electoral process. Let me say this to you. Again, I like to bring in the personal to emphasize what I am thinking and perhaps what other people are thinking too. I voted twice in my life. Never voted in New York elections, Boston elections, or the US federal elections. Never. Never voted before I left here, though I was eligible. Never voted since, well, I voted twice since I came back in 15 and 20. And that is public knowledge that both times I voted for Mr. Granger and the coalition. After what happened in 2020, my word has been, and I think I'll be keeping it, is that I'll not vote again, that I'm done with voting. So you can add me to that percentage there that the IRI came up for, and whatever reason you want to put against my name, my 0.000% 1% of a poll to be done some other time, is that there is this continuing despair over where we are as a people and where we are going. Because if our system, look at these numbers again, look at these numbers, gather them together, fuse them together for a moment. What they're telling us is that we are a people who believe that we are coexisting with a with a flawed system, with flawed results, so we are living a farce. Gentlemen, listeners, we are living a fraud and a farce. But let's leave out fraud for a moment. We are living a farce. What bigger folly can we be committing as a learned adults, having reasoned discourses, having informed discussions to make informed decisions? I think this speaks for itself, and it's not a laughing matter. So excuse me for smiling here at the moment. It's just that I'm so disgusted with all of this that it just boils over at times. To repeat, we are coexisting with a flawed process, as the numbers attest, with flawed results, as the people raise their hands and say, we don't believe it, we don't agree with it, we don't accept it. So we are living with this our system of governance that comes about, not system of a government that comes about one way or the other from a process that nobody has any confidence in. What does that say about us? How do we go forward like this? How do we build anything like this? That's it for me.
Jeffrey?
I know Mr. Lal there. He's a great moralist. He actually, for 30 years, the PNC was walking around saying they win elections when they knew precisely what was going on. David was on the street telling them, you didn't win any election. This, that. Yeah, the PNC was there. I wrote things since 1985 saying this thing is not, you didn't win any election. But these people keep it. Now the Indian is just having their Burnham moment. They're going to keep saying these things. Don't matter. That 28% will still vote for the PPP the next time around. So, mind you, because there was a lot of African people in PNC time would sit down and say, yeah, about this thing here, I know this election rigged for truth. But you get them in the public domain and they're not ever going to say it. I wrote my little book on that confusion, and people were reading it in secret at the PNC General Council. The truth is that, and it's not Guyana alone. You see, that's why I'm trying all the time for people to understand this is not, we cannot talk to these people. Look at Northern Ireland, you could talk to the people there all the time. Look, watchman, ethnically, racially, we are all the same. But ethnically, we are Catholics and this, and yet they were fighting. So you have got to sit down really and see it's this system. And that is why we have to strategize how to deal with the system. Now, in terms, one of the figures that shocked me was after all the propaganda about the oil system, only 2% of people showed any, 18 and over, show any interest in the oil.
And I was coming to that, but anyhow,
that
since you
one
introduced
shocked me. That one,
yes.
I
Go
never
ahead.
thought.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the others ain't really. They didn't. Only for all the propaganda, all this about oil, only people. I don't know how to read that. Are you saying that the oil is in such good hands that the PVP or whosoever are doing such a good job that nobody needs to worry? Or you are saying the oil is secondary, we got nothing to get from this, so don't bother with oil, and so on. I'm not certain how to read it. But that was something that shocked me. 2% of people of this country, because I give that they have done the polling in the proper way, care about the out. How does that happen? Given their level of
maybe the alienation.
That
Maybe
same story.
yes.
Look, boss, oil or no oil, I live in the country.
Right.
No, I have I have a problem with telling people they must leave, because I think what you are facing here is a battle. It's a war. It's a war against these two parties. You have got to strategize about this war, and you're going to need people to strategize. You can't just leave it to them. 60 years you have left it to them, and 70 years we have been going and coming. And well, not so much myself. I went to study and come back, and did that a couple of times. But the point is that I don't feel good telling Guyanese, you are in a struggle. This struggle will not succeed if these parties are using America as a tension maintenance valve. We say in social science that America is the tension. When people get vexed, they think that they got America to run to. So there's no big uproar about what's taking place. So I'm always very cautious and think about, I agree that people must go and study, do what you like, but bear in mind, this is a country that you are, and if everybody goes, the system will not change. The system will stay as it is. The question is to try to mobilize people and move them to go forward. So I'm a bit cautious.
But GHK is saying, leave, better yourself, and come back.
Yeah, but by the time that you're old, you can't do nothing. You're coming back to rest. You're not. Now, let's be fair here. That by the time you go do that and you come back, it's about time, to take a rest. And you're not going to think, yes, come back. I agree. I see the motivation. I can see, you talk about you got that, I got that. And I never thought she would have stayed there anyway. But that's not the point. The point is that you have to try to motivate people to stay and try to fight this battle. This is a big battle. You might think it's just about the PNC and the PVP. It's not as simple as that. It's the structure of the countries that educate you in a given way. And the result is what you are seeing. This is not an easy thing. And therefore I have a problem with that. I mean, I would want to do like the Ukrainian fella say, stay and fight, stay and fight. We might die, but stay and fight this thing. You got to change it.
You gotta
So
change it.
I don't know.
Adam, before I bring you in, the same question. This question about 50% of the people really have no confidence in the electoral system. Only 1% really see the oil as a big deal. Let me just say welcome here to Auntie Brenda from Providence, and cousin Sherry. They're great fans. And of course, there are others of you who are loyal politics 101 people. Just want to thank you all for showing Mr. Lal lots of love here tonight. He's a new, you're all accustomed to Adam and Henry people, and you all know the rhythm. But I'm really heartened by the love that you all have shown to our new guest here tonight. Adam, over to you. Your volume.
Yeah. The 1% on oil is because the vast majority of people don't understand what's happening in oil, and they got other things to worry about. They're saying to themselves, if anything come, it come. I did this column, and in today's papers, Stabrook News, Anand Gulsaran analyzed some failed projects in this country. And when I add up the cost of those projects, I tell you, you had the airport, you got the Skeldon Sugar Factory 300, the one laptop per family, the e-governance cable that we were bringing from Brazil to link up to Georgetown to give us God knows what. When I add up all of that money that we throw away, it turned out that that money was more than we got in the Natural Resources Fund from the oil we sell, and it was also more than the little royalty we get from Exxon. That is the amount of money we throw away. So when people talk about the 1% oil, they know that nothing ain't coming, and they ain't worrying if it come. It come. The other side of the coin, though, is that the message for oil has not been very clear. The government monopolized the state media in selling the oil message. Those who knew the seriousness of it had to resort to social media. And a lot of people would go to social media not to pay too much attention to the serious thing like oil and EPA and all of that. They got their own interests they want to. So 1% of the people are saying, yeah, we looking at the oil thing. 99% saying we ain't key. What happened. And that's a frightening situation. Glenn Lal is kicking up his heels, trying his best to motivate people. And then people turn around to say he mad. Is all he talking about. Gives you an idea of what people say. Nobody, a lot of them people talking about never see an oil rig. They never see a container, a little snap glass with little of the oil to say this is what we're bringing out. So they have nothing to relate to. 1% excellent fact. And I support that conclusion by the IRI.
GHK, what do you read? 1% take an interest in the oil as an important issue.
Well, I think is one of the biggest things around in this country that has happened to this country for at least since independence, and I'm surprised that caught me.
Yeah.
That anything below 25% would have caught me and really shaken me up. And the fact that all of this is going on, and we are not talking about millions anymore, we're talking about billions in infrastructure products, many such projects. We are talking on the other side of the coin about Guyanese who are feeling the pain, not the pinch. So you've got these two extremes, and yet only 1%, 2% are saying that, well, the oil means something to us. I think, as Adam said, part of it can be traced to lack of understanding, but I also believe that Guyanese are of this mentality that, look, we did going on good before the oil come, we did managing somehow, and now that the oil come and we ain't get nothing, we can manage again. And you know what? Wherever we get is little gravy, is little icing on the cake, and we can take it and we can be out. So this again perpetuates the hegemony, the continuity of the two major parties, that whatever happens with this oil is is meaningless, because the people are saying we got to go out there and hustle, we got to go out there and struggle. Now, I would have really liked to see that the private media, besides Glenn Lal, besides Kaitor News, really be passionate about this oil, because it represents so much for the future prospects of this country. We can talk about, we're not going to talk about sanctity of contracts and the sacrosanct nature of contracts and all of that. What we're going to say is that, look, I heard Mr. Norton say we've got to benefit from it. Exxon must make money, in my words, must make money, and that Guyanese must also get to benefit from this thing. I agree with that. I applaud that. But we're going to have to put some real muscle to the wheel. And in echoes of Dr. Jeffrey, we're going to have to fight for it. We're going to have to put our shoulders to the wheel here and say, hey, listen, we are going to have to lie down in the street at some time. We're going to have to take whatever action. And Dr. Hines, you will be familiar with that mode of MO from way, way back. It's going to come, or we're going to end up like Nigeria. We're going to end up like Venezuela, and that's the beyond my time, which I see is going to happen here. The problem is that so many Guyanese are leaving, that we have this escape valve, this exit strategy, right? A number of us have foreign papers, and so it's there in our back pocket in the event that push come to shove. So oil is there; it's a nice thing. If we get something, it's a nicer thing. If we ain't get nothing, you know what? We can keep going along. But still, notwithstanding all of this, it is surprising, even a bit shocking, and it takes a lot to shock me, that only this this little percent, this tiniest of percent of Guyanese could say, well, we know that the oil out there, but this is all we can say about it. We need to educate ourselves. We need to understand how the new slavery works, the new colonialism works, the new imperialism works, and this is gonna create some seismic waves around the place. But to hell with it. The Columbus did it to the Aztecs. The slave traders did it to Africa. The British Raj did it in India with the collaboration of the Maharajas. And so now we have Exxon and the Chinese and John Hess and company coming here, and they are the new enslavers of the 21st century, with a nice camouflage, free and fair elections, and democracy. Who can argue with that? So for oil democracy, what we have is oil democracy and nothing else but that. And you know what? Some gonna get, and the rest of we ain't gonna get.
GHLL, our new guest tonight. Tell you what, we have only gone through this poll about 40% of the way. We still have 60% to cover, and we are coming down on time. Next week, we are going to come back with this to go through the rest of the poll and try to make sense of what it's telling us. There are a couple of things that shocked us. There are a few things. There are a lot of things that confirm what we already know. And there are some things that one is not too sure what's happening. We're going to tease out the rest of the poll next week. Um, let's, and I'm bringing back the same panel to do that next week, by which time everybody would have gone through the poll with a fine-tooth comb, and so we will be able to engage the rest, and we'll see whether things add up, because you know these polls go. Sometimes one question gives a certain response, and then you have another question may contradict the response. You see where we go. But I think there are a couple of things that have been made clear here tonight, that people have strong views on issues, but those views do not translate into political action, or as we in terms of voting. And that's an issue that we have in our Guyana and in societies like ours, as Dr. Jeffrey keeps saying. It is not that people don't have strong views on issues, but when they go to the polling, how do they translate or not translate that into the vote? I think that is the existential question, puzzle that we in Guyana have to work out. Closing thoughts with you, GHA.
I think the poll was timely. I think it hit some soft spots in our country. It exposed some tremendous weaknesses that we live with, and it gives us an opportunity because the grassroots have spoken. It gives the political people an opportunity to say, the people are speaking, and it's time that we start listening to them. Will they? We hope so.
Adam Harris. Adam, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I had some bad internet and I missed some of the things that were said. Well, my closing thoughts is that yes, the 1%, while I can't say I'm entirely surprised, it was shocking. The fact that 48%, only 48% found the economy to be a pressing issue, that was a little surprising. And the whole question of the young people feeling that the country, through its politicians, is offering them nothing, that's a reality. Those are things I'd like to see change. I don't think I have much longer on this earth. And I don't know that I'm going to see our politicians change to the point where we're going to engage young people, where we're going to get them into organizations so that they can take over. Because ever since Burnham days, we are talking about the youth are the future. Well, Burnham died more than 30 years ago. And when I look back at the young people, we're sidelining them. So we're not giving them a chance to be the future. But again, and as you said, I will get a chance to really read the poll. So when we come back next week, perhaps I'd be able to make a better contribution.
No, your contribution was quite valuable tonight, even if you didn't read the poll, because I was able to supply the numbers. So contribution were on spot. Henry Jeffrey.
Well, let me say this, that for me, the cooperation of the political elites in this country is at the center of any solution you want to bring to Guyana. And you know, a couple of numbers, I'm only going to say two today, indicates this to me. For instance, when they came to speak to the notion of electoral reform, remember both parties want electoral reform, PPP, PNC. Guess what? Guess how many Guyanese want electoral reform? 80%. you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This thing happened. the PNC has all kind of problem with what we will call the nitty-gritty of the system. But you hear what it says there? 80% of the party says that it is necessary, essential, that the process, essentially, I'm just trying to put this together. The process is kind of cooperative, consensual, and so on.
Yeah.
You see, because once you have the parties agreeing, the people agree. If the parties do not agree, the people don't agree. And even when they know the situation to be different. And that is why it is important that we try to engineer and find ways of forcing these parties to work together. There is the only way. You have to share governance. The USAID report said you have to share governance in Guyana, or it's not going to go anywhere.
Tomorrow night, we're going to be discussing Article 13. What it means, what it doesn't mean. Does it mean anything? And we're going to have Mr. Ralph Ramkaran, who one would say one of the founders. He was integrally involved in the elections reform process, which put that Article 13 in there 2 decades ago. And he will be on Politics 101 for the first time. Ralph Ramkaran, who was there when they were putting Article 13, we will hear from him what the framers meant. And we're going to have Nigel Hughes, who's a regular. So tomorrow night, like tonight, all-star team, Ralph Ramkaran, Nigel Hughes, inclusive democracy, Article 13 of the Constitution. This poll from the IRI said 40% of the people feel that they ought to be educated about the Constitution. When we planned this program, I hadn't read that. I just felt that since the last election, we've been talking a lot about the Constitution, Article 13. Do we know what it means? Tomorrow night, Ralph Ramkaran and Nigel Hughes. Article 13 in the Constitution, does it really mean the inclusive democracy that we are talking about, or is just words thrown together? Join us tomorrow night. After tonight, you are sure to want to join us. I want to thank my panel tonight. And remember, we're coming back next Tuesday, same time, same place, for part 2 of this poll. If you are looking for informed analysis, if you're looking for critical analysis, if you are looking for the kind of information you need to make independent decisions, I'm not saying you're going to be active independent, but make independent determination. This is the place for it. Good night, my brothers. Good night to the audience, and see you all tomorrow night.
Good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.